very special guest, Miss Eunice Lehmacher, who is running for the U.S. House in South Carolina's 3rd Congressional District against Representative Sheri Biggs. She's joining us today to talk about that race and why she decided to run. So, Ms. Lehmacher, you've spent your career as a social worker, counselor. How have those experiences shaped your views on policy and the role of government?
Well, I've been a medical social worker and psychotherapist for the last several decades, but before that, I was a high school teacher, a librarian, and I also worked with the homeless when I was a church employee. So I've run up against quite a few problems that I was trying to solve, like where do we put the homeless, or education issues, or medical issues. I've met families that had so big medical bills that they ended up losing their home. And the federal government provides some of these problems. There's just too many limits. There's too many things that are in the way for people. If you're sick with cancer, you don't need hundreds of hassles with insurance.
Correct. That's the last thing you need.
Exactly. So it is this frustration I got. I'm working on these various roles I had the longest as a social worker, and finding there's all these times that I can't get what I want done, including I do a lot of work in the community on the environment. And it became clear to me the leaders are the problem. The leaders are what's getting in our way. Never
the policymakers.
Never more true than today, when our government seems to be causing problems as if we didn't already had problems, and they don't seem to know our current problems. They're just creating more.
Right. Well, I mean, it's clear that you've been active for a long time, actually working on the problem. What was the tipping point? What made you decide I have to run?
You mean for this race, or when I first
We'll
ran
get to the
in
other
general?
ones, but for this particular race, yes.
Right now, there's just too much chaos, and it is coming from the federal government. And I believe, and it became clear to me January, February, March of 2025, that we got to get this Congress out of office. The Congress was created in the First Amendment. The president is not the amendment, first article. The Congress is in the first article, the president in the second, and yet the first article people are Congresspeople, Congresswoman Biggs, who's the incumbent, just isn't doing their job. And, you know, anger gets you eventually, and you're just like, we got to change this. They need to all get out of office and start working for the people. And so it was probably in the spring that I had enough and said, somebody's got to do something.
You know, I love that, because on a much smaller level, that's why I'm in the role I am now as the 3rd vice chair. I woke up the day after the election in 2024 and went, I'll be damned, it happened again.
Yes.
I don't want to just keep complaining.
Yes.
Because, you know, you never want to just be that person who's just complaining into the wind. Let's go do something.
Right. And I can run for office. Many people can't.
Right.
So, for example, I talked to somebody who's disabled who wanted to run. And obviously you can run if you're disabled, but more challenging for her. So she would like to support me running. So I felt like if you can do it and it has to be done, we've got to get people in there and running. So, yeah, exactly. That's not acceptable the way it is now.
No, it's not. And you really hit on it. Congress is the ultimate overseer.
Right.
And they have totally abdicated that responsibility essentially to one man.
Right.
And they continue to give him more and more power.
Right.
You've run before at the state level, which you just hinted at.
Yeah.
What did you learn from those experiences, and how are you approaching this race, especially being in a district that's so rural, like District 3?
Yeah. So I ran for city council in Clemson many years ago, and then I ran for the state house in 2020 and 2024. And all of those races, I learned a lot. For example, volunteers are critical. You can't do it all by yourself.
Oh, man, yes.
That campaigns cost money, and I'm not independently wealthy. That should be obvious.
It costs money to become a politician?
Well, not to become a politician.
Or to be one?
But to run for office, it costs money. And unfortunately, we have so many rich politicians running our country that can self-fund their campaign, but I can't. So I learned that there are many generous people that want to help. That, again, they're the people that decided they couldn't run, but they're like, how can I help you? So that's one thing. And then I've learned some of the organizational structure. I am an Emerge alumni. Are you familiar with Emerge?
Yes, absolutely. We have another Emerge alum running in the 4th District.
Yes. So I took the Emerge training in 2020 when I ran for State House and learned a lot of things, and am glad to be in a group of people that include people like Kamala Harris and so many others who have already won. And I can learn from them, and that's a sisterhood. We all help each other. More Democratic women in office, I say.
No, Emerge is a great organization.
Yes.
They train women and non-binary people to run for office or to manage campaigns. It's an extraordinary organization. It really is.
Only Democrats, though.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. To run as Democrats or manage Democratic campaigns.
Yes.
You touched on it with the volunteers, though. And people knocking on doors may be the most important part of, a grassroots campaign, right?
Right.
This is a very rural district. It's a deeply red district. I believe Sheri Biggs won 71% of the vote in 2024. Donald Trump is at the top of the ticket. That obviously kind of blows that turnout up, right? But how are you approaching these conversations with people in such a deeply red district?
So that was a couple of questions, but
yes,
I'll try.
I a couple in there.
No, it's good. So the first thing I want to say is we say that this is a red state and a red district, and I say it's a state and a district where people don't vote. So you pointed out correctly that a lot of people voted in 2024 and 2020 because Trump was on the ballot. We will not have that in this election, 2026. And so we can get out the vote from the people that would vote for me, which I think is not just Democrats. I think it's independents. I think it's Republicans that are tired of what's happening, the chaos that the current administration is causing. How do I plan to go about that? So to be honest, my favorite thing about campaigning is canvassing.
Yes.
I go after that by just asking people, what's your concern in the federal government? I've been asking that. And so many people say, oh, wow, that would take me a while to explain. Right. They can't come up with one or two issues. But I like to listen first and then address their issue. Now, the other thing you pointed out is the rural nature of the district. It was relatively easy to get to most homes in my small state house district, which surrounded Clemson University, just a couple of towns. Right. This is 10 counties.
It's huge. It's a big district.
It's mostly
square miles, right?
Right. It's mostly rural counties. We're sitting here in Greenville where people do live closer together. But if you go down to Saluda, McCormick, some of those, Oconee, that's a very rural area. So canvassing is time consuming. If you live in a rural area, you're super important. But to do it, it could only be done with volunteers. Right. So what I'm in the phase of now in the campaign is recruiting first the leaders. So, for example, I'd love to find a canvassing chair for the Greenville County part of my district that takes only part of Greenville County is in my district, and for each of those counties, and then anybody that's willing to canvass. And what I got the most success with in my previous races is people saying, I'll go to my neighborhood, give me the stuff. Right. And then they know their neighbors, and then they can say, I know Eunice, and I'd vote for her, and would you vote for her too? And in addition, they can say on November 3rd or whatever day they go to vote, fortunately we can go before that, would you like to go with me and let's go out to pizza afterwards? I think that especially if you're in a Hispanic area, like I have that in Walhalla and Oconee County, it might be safer to go as a group, right? So I'm encouraging right now as many volunteers as possible. So my website is www.eunice4sc, perhaps you can show that on the screen. And there's a button that says support, and obviously there's a donation link, but there's also a link where you can say, I'd like to have you over to my house to meet some of my friends, or I'd like to volunteer in some way, and then we'll get back with you and find a place for everyone. One of the fun things that volunteers have said to me so far, I had somebody contact me the other day and said, I want to help, but I'm not a people-y person. And I said, tell me about that. What's not a people-y person? And she said, I'm not wanting to go door to door and make phone calls, but I can do stuff in the background. And I mean, we totally have those roles too. So she's editing and writing for me and helping with newsletters. So we have roles of all sorts, including things like this, filming, editing. So we've got a lot of roles, and I'm looking for more people.
Well, I mean, you talked about it, right? The structure that it takes to run for Congress. Because, I mean, once you get past the state house, the amount of people you're representing is massive. I mean, it's like hundreds of thousands of people.
It is lots of people and lots of needs and lots of different kinds of issues. Right. They don't all have, obviously, Greenville County and Greenwood County and Anderson County have completely different issues. They have some similar issues, but it is important for me to canvass in all those places, and I plan to, so I get to understand the different issues. But each time I go to a county, so for example, I have some events scheduled, and I tell them, look, I'm coming all the way out to Saluda County. Could you set up a canvas after that, or a meet and greet, so that I also care about the environment, and all of us care right now because of the gas prices, right? And so I'm trying to go out and do several things in the county at each visit. And then if I take a group of people canvassing afterwards, they're like, I went with Eunice. I kind of know how to do this. I can do it on my own now. So that's the concept.
And, I think you have a great approach, because people do, it can be intimidating. Especially if somebody's never volunteered before, knocking on a stranger's door. Because people think about, I don't really like when people knock on my door. But in reality, the vast majority of people are nice. The vast majority of people are willing to at least have a conversation with you. And it can be fun.
It is fun. And I've noticed that what you said, almost everybody I've ever recruited to canvass. And I think when I ran for State House last time, we had well over 20 people canvassing with me, and some of them went alone. And almost all of them the first time, not true of everyone. There were one or two that just said, I love it, I'll do it, when can I start? But all the rest of them said, ugh, I don't know if I want to do this. They generally started in their own neighborhood. And afterwards, they called me back and said, I did the whole neighborhood. I loved it. Yeah. It was really fun. Of course, you don't go to the houses that still have up a Trump banner. And we do pick out, with data we get from the Democratic Party, which are the best houses to go to. Right. We don't need to go to people that are going to vote Democratic no matter what and going to vote Republican no matter what. We need to go to the people who are somewhere in between. So they sometimes vote Democratic. They don't vote very often. Yep. And so those are the people we're going to persuade. And it is really easy to persuade, because people are like, wow, especially if I come, I'm the candidate. You came to my door, right?
They love when the actual person shows up.
But let's say I go with a group. So you're on that side of the street. I'm on this side of the street. And then you can say, she's right over there. If you have a question, I can go and get her. Or you can say, well, actually, I know her. We've talked before, and I know how she feels about that. And did you know she used to be a high school teacher, if they're talking about education? And she understands the problems teachers have. So most people are just delighted that nobody's selling anything, that they're getting information, and that we're all respectful, right? If they say, I'm making dinner, I have a minute, then you take a minute, right? Exactly. You say, here's some literature you can look at later. So most people love it after they do it the first time. And we take most people with someone the first time. We don't say, here, go, here's the names. We say, who do you want to go with? When's a good time? Here's the dates. So we make it fun, and people end up loving it. Yeah,
and it should be fun. We talked about the rural nature of the district. I mean, you mentioned some towns like McCormick. I used to sell insurance. We went to McCormick a lot. Uh-huh. It's a drive, and it's also vastly different from, the cities. Right?
It is.
And so the needs are so different. But healthcare is one of the biggest issues and really crises in America in rural places, is access to good healthcare, especially with the Medicaid, funding being cut and rural hospitals closing. What will you advocate for in Congress, and what does Congress need to do to address access to good healthcare in rural districts like the 3rd District?
Love the question. Thank you. I am a healthcare provider, and I have actually I provide mental health services, and I've provided those in a number of these counties: Pickens County, Oconee County, Lawrence County, and Abbeville County. I've been a provider in all those counties, so I do understand it's quite different. Mm-hmm. And what one can tell about the healthcare and insurance system in the U.S. is that there are not very many healthcare providers in Congress. So we're passing kind of not very well educated laws. So yes, of course, I'm for Medicaid expansion, but there are other ways to expand Medicaid than just that, what the South Carolina government doesn't want to do. For example, as a provider, I know some of the things that, for example, I actually like seeing Medicaid patients, but there are more hoops to jump for Medicaid. And there are things that make filing for Medicaid and its many daughters, they're called managed care organizations. The managed care organizations are trying to make money, and so they like to deny claims. And we could pass laws that say if you're sick, you have a treatable diagnosis, depression, whatever, and you've been seen, that you should get that covered. I'll give you an example. I have a friend who has a practice in Seneca, and she got audited probably because she's a children's therapist and provides therapy, her practice, to hundreds, if not thousands of children. And they got managed by a managed care organization that is one of the Medicaids. I won't say which one. And the problem with the audit was they had recently changed the rule that her signature needed to be at the top of the page and not the bottom of the page. And then they denied the claim.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, I think that they did that in order to be able to deny claims, in order to make money. They put out new manuals every year and make...
So to make it hard.
Yes. And, of course, they're trying to make money. Now, yes, does this save the government money in Medicaid? Yes, except it costs us money because people who need treatment then aren't getting it. Or what happens is providers like my friend are like, I think I'll stop taking Medicaid. It's such a pain.
Yes.
So we could pass...
Which makes it more difficult to get care.
We could pass laws at the federal and definitely at the state level that... I want to be audited. I mean, I welcome audits. When I do a record and I've done something that could be better, not where I place my signature, but how I documented, I want to be audited. But the audit should be a way for me to learn and to provide better care, not a way to claw back money. And so we need somebody in Congress who understands these little points, which would not cost any tax dollars to make those changes. It would just say managed care organizations, you got to be honest. You got to tell people when you change rules. And if the audit is about where the signature is, give them a warning and tell them to change it next year. But don't take away the reimbursement for the service.
You know, Ms. Eunice, you know what I love about what you just said the most? It is so practical. And common sense. You're not talking about restructuring Medicaid or restructuring. And also, if you could just give a little context on what a managed care organization is. But you're being so pragmatic about this. This seems like a no-brainer, honestly.
Yes. And again, I just want to point out, you don't have a lot of healthcare providers in office. So we have people, I mean, I have nothing against lawyers being in office or businessmen, but they don't know anything. They've all got the top of the line insurance. They've never been on Medicaid, right? So these are very practical, simple things. And they're things that even Republicans wouldn't resist, right? Republicans in our state are resisting expanding Medicaid because they have this fake idea that it's going to cost more money. It's actually going to save thousands. We could discuss that at length. But this is... So one of the things that as a therapist that I'm trained in, I do couples counseling, for example. Two people come in, they have a lot of conflict, and I help them talk to each other.
Oh, so, Congress needs somebody like that. Couples counselor.
Right. So I think I could talk to people in Congress and help them understand this is a simple thing you could do, costs no money, and it increases access to health care, and it saves money in the long term. This child who's depressed gets treatment, gets better, does better in school, doesn't flunk, whatever.
So, it almost makes too much sense.
Yeah. But to get back to managed care organization, both Medicare and Medicaid a number of years ago created sort of what you would call contractors to provide coverage for some people. So if you have Medicaid, it's usually, I think, chosen for you. If you have Medicare, you get to choose yourself. In Medicare, it's called Medicare Advantage. So let me talk about that one. So if you do Medicare straight, it's pretty easy for me to file. But Medicare Advantage, each of the different organizations that offer different benefits to people who get it, they require me to do different things when I file my notes and when I file my charges. And that's complex. But these organizations, the Medicare Advantage organizations, are offering some benefits to people, but they're also designed to save Medicare money. So Medicare, so for example, I can get whatever, let's say I can get $100 to see you for an hour because you're having problems. Right. Then maybe the Medicare Advantage company only gets $80. Well, they're going to try to get that $80 back from me somehow, the provider. Okay. And they're going to try to not serve as many people, just like everybody who's trying to make a profit. So I'm not opposed to companies trying to make a profit. I'm pro-business. But I think that these companies have taken advantage of Congresses and state houses who don't understand the process. And I don't think we need to go into the weeds here because most people don't need to know all this.
But what you're saying is making sense.
Yeah.
But also what I would just say personally is that we need to stop treating the care of human beings' minds and bodies as a commodity.
Yes. Yes.
Healthcare should not be based on profit. It should be based on the health of our nation and the people who make up our society.
Totally agree. Although it should also be efficient and not waste money.
Of course it can be. But we shouldn't deny people coverage in order for that.
I totally agree with that. And we need to be talking about how healthcare coverage and going to a doctor or a nurse or whatever, a hospital, saves us money.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So one of my healthcare suggestions, I am running on let's expand healthcare. Let's put more doctors and hospitals in rural areas in particular. One of my ideas is instead of this sort of big, I'm calling it billionaire bill, instead of the other adjective they're using, is they just put everything in the kitchen sink in there. I want to work with my colleagues in Congress to have smaller bills. So the first smaller bill, not everything I want, is let's move Medicare down to 64.
Okay. What does that accomplish?
Well, it covers people who are pretty sick sometimes, and it gives them care before they are so sick that they're really expensive, like before they need to be hospitalized. So, for example, let's say somebody's depressed. That's the kind of people I see, or anxious, but they're not so anxious they can't leave the house yet, or that they need to be hospitalized. I can give them treatment, and they can get less anxious, leave the house, make a friend, right? If we let that go, then they never leave the house and eventually have to be hospitalized because of whatever reason, that's much more expensive. So expanding access to healthcare to more people, and the population 55 to 65, especially men, is one of the highest suicide rates in the country. That makes sense, right? Men over 55 are sometimes getting laid off because they're expensive to keep on.
Right.
They get depressed. This affects their self-esteem. They have trouble finding a job. Those folks need access.
A lot of times those jobs are men's identity, right?
Yes. So they need access to mental health care, but also you're more likely to have heart and diabetes and all kinds of problems at older ages. So what I want to do is move it down to 64. I'm, of course, in favor of moving it down to 0, but take a small bill.
Right.
Get the Congress people who are 64 and whose wives are 64 and whose sisters are 64. Get them to sponsor the bill. Pass that. Have everybody see how that saves money. The next year, let's do 63.
Again, just a pragmatic approach and a compromising approach.
Exactly.
Right?
That's the only way we can get government done. I remember it when we had governments that compromised. Do you remember that? Of course you do. But some of our listeners...
Do I remember that? I grew up in the era of 9/11 and the Iraq War. It got pretty nasty after that.
And after that, there wasn't much compromise in Congress. And I'm going there not just to do the next 2 years, for our foreseeable future, for the people that are going to live hundreds of years after us.
Exactly.
And
the next 7 generations, right?
Right. And for getting to know these people, right? In the old days, Congress people babysat for each other. They went out to dinner together. I want to take my bike to Congress. I want to walk. I want to have a walk to Congress Day. I want to have a week where we all eat a SNAP diet and learn something. So I want to work on relationships.
That's such a lost idea. It's almost funny you say that. It's so obvious, right? But we don't do that at all. Representative James Clyburn, the only Democratic representative in South Carolina, I saw him speak last year, and he talked about how he was such good friends with Trey Gowdy, who used to be the congressman in the 4th District before he retired from Congress, and they played golf, and they were such great friends. They didn't agree on anything, but they were great friends, so sometimes they could come together and talk to each other. But it got so bad, Trey Gowdy left Congress.
Yeah. Well, and that's not uncommon. We're having that happen across the board.
There's a wave of retirements,
And these friendships aren't happening as much anymore because people are rich people. I'm not sure I'll be able to afford this. They're flying in Tuesday morning. They're flying out Thursday night. They are not spending the weekend together. They don't need to babysit each other's children because they're back at home.
Right.
So that's part of why that's changed. But I want to get there and figure out the way to get back to being friends with my opponents. We have plenty of politicians that have done that, and I want to be one of those.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question, which is my last question for you. Day one, January 3rd or whatever it would be, 2027. What is your top priority as a United States Congresswoman?
Well, because we're talking about 2027 and it's after 2025, I really have to say my top priority is impeaching the president and quite a few other people who he's put in who are breaking the law, who are not honoring the Constitution, and quite frankly, they're not honoring international law. I think we're seeing war crimes right now. So it is my belief when I get there that there will be a lot of new Democrats there, and I hope there will be a lot of new Republicans there, all of whom think that this Congress needs to step up, do first article work, and say, we are the checks and balances, and let's start impeachment processes. Now, I know that doesn't get people anything. I also want to work on healthcare. I also want to work on relationships with these people.
That does get people something.
Yeah.
That gets people better leadership.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Seconded. I could not agree more. Ms. Lehmacher, thank you for joining us. Good luck. Hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. I've enjoyed it. I appreciate you having me.
Of course. We'll see you next time.
The Greenville County Democratic Party appreciates your time listening and watching the Whole Truth Podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. While you're there, please follow us, like, or subscribe to this channel to help us spread the word. The Democratic Party needs you to get actively involved and join us at future events. You can find out about them at multiple locations like the GCDP website, greenvilledemocrats.com, and browse the events calendar. You can also keep up with us through our social media presence on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, and Threads. Look for @GVLDem. Thanks again for listening. Let's get out there and do what we can to rebuild our government into one that serves us all. Thanks.